The death of beloved D&D characters can represent a heroic sacrifice to protect the party and allow them to get closer to their quest. It can be a time of redemption for past misdeeds and the revelation of the hero within. It can be a shocking turn of events, taking the story in a surprising direction nobody expected. Sometimes, though, it's an ignoble and forgettable death, unworthy of songs. Ironically, even that can make it memorable. Such is how it goes. Character death, however, also means that a player's investment in a character may come to an end. And because of that, it makes sense that DM and players are aligned about the risks of characters facing death in a campaign and its consequences. So, let's discuss the 3 issues DM and players should align about character death in session 0. The first of them is campaign lethality. Some campaigns are lighthearted and death is a rare and extraordinary event. Others are meat grinders. It's essential to align with players on what kind of game we're playing so they understand how much risk they can expose themselves to in combat. If we want to design a challenging campaign, the best way to adjust its difficulty level is tweaking the encounter challenge rates or constraining the party's opportunities to take rests between them. The other option would be adjusting the monster combat tactics, but I don't like that for 2 reasons. It makes combat artificial, as the DM has, for example, to choose illogical targets for the monster's attack, and as a consequence of that, it takes away some of the fun from the DM running the game. A balanced combat encounter is an opportunity for the DM to have fun making smart tactical choices and putting the players under pressure with no holds barred. Players can feel when we do that, increasing their perception of danger, focus on the game, and sense of accomplishment when they succeed. It's a win-win. That means, for instance, that intelligent monsters concentrate their attack on spellcasters. There's perhaps one exception to that: attacking down characters to finish them off. I call that the evil mode. If you plan to activate the evil mode, that's definitely something you should talk about with players before the campaign starts. The next issue is the timing of death. Do we want our games to be as realistic and challenging as possible, and therefore death may come anywhere at any time? Or do we want our campaign to focus on outstanding storytelling, including heroic and remarkable character deaths? Some players take their character's death in the chin like a champ if it means a heroic sacrifice or a major campaign moment, or if they're killed in action fighting a powerful villain. Those same players may not be able to hide their frustration with their characters dying on a simple trap or a random encounter. That's another thing that we can openly talk about with our players. Once again, the adjustments here should not be based on combat tactics, but instead on tuning down the CR of lower importance encounters. Such encounters can focus on draining the party resources instead of putting them under an actual death threat. And we can always balance that by tuning up the CR of the major encounters. The discussion about the timing of death also informs DMs willing to fudge dice rolls not to kill characters. If you've all agreed to make death outside major moments an exception, you know those are the times that you can omit that critical hit or that massive damage roll that would result in instant death for a character. Finally, it's also worth discussing the consequences of death. I like to think of 5 categories for that, from the least to the most consequential: defeat, intervention, resurrection, quest, and fresh start. I outright dislike the first one, defeated, not dead, but since it's in the new Dungeon Master's Guide, I guess it makes sense to talk a bit about it. The DMG provides 2 alternatives to death: sudden awakening or comatose. In both of them, the character is unconscious instead of dead. On sudden awakening, a simple DC 20 Constitution saving throw after a long rest is enough for the character to recover. On the comatose option, the character can recover with the casting of Greater Restoration, a level 5 spell. I don't like those options because they both remove the real threat and consequence of death, significantly cutting down the stakes, tension, and drama of adventuring. On top of that, the comatose option is just too similar to the resurrection alternative, since Raise Dead is also a level 5 spell, so why bother complicating things? They could be helpful for total party kills, but other options create complications that better represent the burden of suffering a TPK. Intervention is a narrative-driven alternative. If things go sideways for a character or the entire party, a powerful ally or god may appear and intervene in their favor. An intervention can happen during combat if things are going bad enough to the point that death is imminent. It can also occur at the time of death, with the ally or god providing healing or resurrection. Or it can happen after death, with a god sending the party's souls back to the world of the living, or an ally resurrecting them, perhaps years after their deaths, or even putting the adventurers in debt. Whatever and whenever an intervention happens, it must make narrative sense and bring storytelling consequences. Otherwise, it feels like an undeserved deus ex machina. So, if you plan to have an intervention up your sleeve, you might as well think about who that ally or god is, why the characters deserve such an intervention, and what price they might have to pay for that entity in exchange for its favors. Resurrection is a straightforward alternative, with 8 spells of different levels that characters can learn or pay for a spellcaster to use. Of course, this alternative doesn't work for a TPK, since there's no one left to cast the spells or bring the corpses to whoever could do that for the party. Next, there's the quest alternative, replacing the cost of death with the burden of players escaping from the great beyond. There are many ways to run that. The surviving characters, joined by backup characters from the dead characters' players, infiltrate the underworld to rescue the deceased souls. Or, in the case of a TPK, the entire party may seek to escape the underworld together. Instead of hacking and slashing their way out of the underworld, the dead characters could face a divine council and roleplay a bargain to be taken back to the world of the living. Alternatively, the villains might have taken the characters to a simple prison after tending to their wounds to ensure they lived. Or the entire group could take on backup characters to rescue the party from prison, hell, or simply recover the original party's corpses to be resurrected. Just like the intervention alternative, the quest is also story-driven. It takes a side road from the main campaign highway, which may not be for every group's taste. If it is, it's also convenient for the DMs have a couple of ideas of how that might play out so that we don't have to make it all up on the fly. And finally, there's the fresh start. That's how we used to do it in the good old days. A character died, create another one. The entire party died. Oh well, let's start a new party or even a new campaign and do better next time. While a bit radical, it is an alternative worth discussing. Many players like the opportunity to try new characters. The group may want to start over with a new party, still fighting the same conflicts presented in the ongoing campaign. Or we might all be fed up with how the campaign was going anyway, so let's take the opportunity to start anew. As you can see, death doesn't need to be the final destination. It can be a minor hindrance, a short detour, or pave the way for new exciting stops in the way, as long as we're all aboard and aware of where we're headed. And that's why we should always talk with our players about campaign lethality, timing of death, and consequences of death, even before our campaign starts.